Discover the hidden fears of Ottoman princesses on their transformative first wedding night. Emily sat hunched over the sturdy oak table in her cozy apartment, surrounded by an assault of papers and books, a battlefield of history and ambition. The rain lashed against the windows, a backdrop to her turmoil, as the echo of her mother's frail voice played on repeat in her mind. "You need stability, Emily. Why can't you follow a safer path?" The disappointment in her mom's eyes pierced through the fog of her studies, demanding that she choose practicality over passion. She glanced at the open journal from her grandmother's attic, the one filled with the princess's deepest fears. Reading it, she felt an unsettling recognition. The words resonated within her, despair laced with the struggle to conform, a chilling echo of what suffocated her own zeal. Am I chasing shadows? She wondered, clenching the pages tightly as frustration manifested in the tension of her muscles. As her research spiraled, so did the pressures from her family. Just last week, her brother voiced the concerns of their aging mother, reminding Emily yet again that academia could never guarantee a real future. Couldn't they see that history was her lifeline? That uncovering these forgotten narratives was essential to her? She hesitated, the fear of failure bubbling beneath her exterior. What if her findings crumbled under scrutiny? What if the esteemed conference was a stage too grand for her untested theories? Before she could drown in those urges to run, she noticed the journal again. Her heartbeat quickened, igniting a flicker of determination. The princess's silent screams for choice resonated. Emily realized this journey wasn't just about obscure histories, it was about her own desperate need to confront her place in the world. But then, doubt spiraled, wrapping around her like chains. The clock was ticking. What if this is all for nothing? She whispered to the empty room. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With the conference looming, a formidable rival publicly questioned her credibility, dismissing her work as trivial, a tactic wrapped in arrogance that drove a dagger straight into her passion. Each critical remark felt like an impending storm. In a wave of anguish, she realized she was teetering on the edge of becoming that princess, suffocated by tradition and expectation, stripped of her autonomy. That night, turbulence brewed as she wrestled with her fears. Would anyone even care about her research? Standing before a room full of esteemed colleagues, could she pull off the delicate balance of vulnerability and authority? What if she failed to connect the royal past with her own present struggles? A tear slipped, scattering across the ornate pages of the journal. In that moment of intersection hers with the princess, something shifted. Perhaps the triumph lay in baring her soul, revealing the fears that all women, from the corridors of the Ottoman court to her local library, shared. As dawn broke, the weight of indecisiveness no longer shadowed her. She was at war with herself, poised on the brink of transformation, yet the looming auditorium whispered doubts that could silence her forever. Would she step forward or retreat once more? The sun peeked through the heavy clouds, bathing Emily's cluttered apartment in a muted golden light as she prepared for the pivotal day ahead. Her heart raced, but with each deep breath, she quelled the whirlwind of anxiety threatening to consume her. The echoes of her family's doubts faded gradually, replaced by the resolute voices of the women whose stories she admired. It wasn't just her research anymore, it was theirs too. Seated back at her oak table, she sipped cooling coffee as she reviewed her notes. Each meticulously crafted line held her essence, the culmination of endless nights and aching fingers. She was no longer the hesitant girl chained to familial expectations. She was an explorer of history, ready to bridge centuries of silence with her voice. The oppressive weights of skepticism felt lighter now, transforming into fuel for her resolve. She recalled the journal, its pages worn by countless readings. The haunted words of the Ottoman princesses inspired her to open up, to speak of her vulnerabilities. They didn't just reflect tales of past fears, rather, they laid a foundation for her own courage. Emily scribbled a line in her notebook: "To be vulnerable is to be powerful." She paused, contemplating the weight of that assertion. Could her struggles illuminate a path for others? As she honed her presentation, a new sense of clarity awakened within her. She saw the common threads weaving through the stories of women across time, their fears, their silences, their brave acts of defiance. They were all voices in a choir, each note resonating with the echoes of hopes, dreams, and the relentless quest for autonomy. Associations formed within her mind. Her journey as a graduate student emerged as parallel to theirs, filled with its own uncertainties and transformative challenges. Yet, the specter of her rival loomed large, an adversary who thrived on doubt. He was an emblem of the noise that threatened to drown her out, but as Emily viewed the conference paper before her, her pulse steadied. Was he not just a reflection of every naysayer she had encountered throughout her life? This realization emboldened her further. She was ready to engage, to rise above the disparagement, and present her work with authenticity rather than defensiveness. Stepping into the evening's venue, she felt the gravity of the space, a time-worn theater brimming with experience and intellect. The air crackled with anticipation, but it suffocated her for a moment. Emily gripped her presentation slides tightly, blinking back the urge to flee. Instead, she drew a slow, deliberate breath, reconnecting to the whispered tales of the past that buoyed her. Her moment approached, and as she stood before the audience, gripping the podium, she summoned the courage. The bright stage lights illuminated not just the room, but the constellations of thoughts, fears, and dreams anchoring her. "I'm not here to convince you of my theories," she began, her voice steadier than expected, "but to share a narrative, a transformative exploration." The words poured forth, weaving the lives of those princesses with her own struggles. She opened the floodgates, revealing not just historical content but the essence of her evolving self. The audience shifted, leaning in, and for the first time, she didn't feel the weight of expectation crushing her spirit. Instead, she felt liberated, aligned with her purpose. As the applause began to rise at the conclusion of her talk, Emily caught her breath, riding the wave of nervous elation. Fundamental fear lay buried beneath her newfound confidence, but that fear no longer defined her. With this debut, she had taken her first steps toward reclaiming her narrative, one that was intricate and deeply intertwined with the legacy of those forgotten women. Believing the audience engaged, she caught a glimpse of her rival, who sported a scowl, his confidence shaken. A spark ignited within Emily, a taste of victory resting tantalizingly at her fingertips. Yet, was this enough? Had she truly embraced the essence of her journey, or was she merely beginning to scrape the surface? The moment of reckoning was surely just beginning. What would she do next? The exhilarating rush of applause reverberated in her ears long after she had left the stage. Emily stepped into the dimly lit corridor, her heart still thundering, a sensation both foreign and exhilarating. The warmth of recognition and approval wrapped around her, but underneath lay an undercurrent of uncertainty. She navigated the throng of conference-goers, her mind racing through the implications of her performance. Had she truly captivated them, or merely entertained? She found a quiet corner, away from the clamor, and leaned against the cool wall. The earlier adrenaline began to give way to self-doubt. The applause felt intoxicating, yet a part of her craved more validation than courteous reactions from strangers. What did their approval mean if she couldn't convince herself? The experience replayed in her mind like an echo. Each moment was marked by the shared vulnerabilities of women through history, yet the weight of those words lingered heavily. Did she truly honor the princesses she had spoken about? Or had she turned them into props for her own narrative, absorbing their trials without paying due respect? The thought gnawed at her, prompting a wave of guilt. Drawing her phone from her pocket, she scrolled through messages from family and friends, congratulatory notes emblazoned with enthusiastic emojis. Each took on a different tint in her fevered mind, praise that echoed hunger rather than gratitude. What were they really seeing? Did they recognize her struggle or simply the surface-level triumph? She sensed her rival's gaze lingering on her as she sank deeper into contemplation. His sneer had been like a mantra recounting her past reminders of every discouraging voice that had shadowed her journey. The wind she had felt moments ago began to wilt under scrutiny. She refused to relinquish the victory, yet the realization struck: she needed to confront the shadows of her insecurities, not just along the way but head-on. Her research was strong, but so too were her vulnerabilities. They deserved visibility, not erasure. Staring at her own reflection in the glass, Emily made a decision. She would reach out to fellow scholars she admired, not for validation but for genuine dialogue. If the voices of the Ottoman princesses had taught her anything, it was that the sharing of truths forging connections through shared experiences could be transformative. They had carried their stories forward, she too must continue to build on her narrative, inviting others into the fold. Over the next few months, her exploration expanded, fueled by the encouragement of newfound colleagues who resonated with her experiences. She delved deeper into the historical context surrounding the Ottoman princesses, seeking lost narratives and overlooked histories. Each discussion sparked new ideas, igniting her understanding of the complexities they faced. Yet the specter of competition grew more pronounced, her rival's dismissive demeanor lingered, constantly challenging her. His sharp critiques, as cutting as they were familiar, pushed her to solidify her own perspectives. Emily became more than a student of history, she sought to become an advocate for its figures, broadening her discourse around the nuances of gender, power, and agency. Each paper she wrote sharpened her analytical skills but also demanded a reckoning with her discomfort. When she chose to include personal anecdotes, her voice flourished, but so too did the weight of her truths linger, forcing her to grapple with the fear of exposure. As the next conference approached, Emily felt the familiar heat of anticipation mixing with trepidation. She had been invited to present on a panel of influential scholars, one in which her rival participated as well. The stakes were higher than before, and her initial exhilaration began to morph into an anxious knot in her stomach. Rather than step back, she leaned in, preparing not just for a battle of intellects but an opportunity for depth and discussion. Her aim shifted this time, presenting was about weaving a greater narrative together. Not just asserting her own. Would she find the confidence to embrace her vulnerabilities publicly, confront her rival head-on if he chose to engage, and deepen the narrative around those princesses she had grown to admire? It was an exploration of courage beyond academia, a confrontation of her deepest fears. With every word penned, Emily moved closer to a colossal truth. The time had come to face not just the history she had researched, but the history of her own growth. Would she rise to the occasion, or succumb to the whispers of doubt that had long haunted her? Emily paced her apartment, the familiar confines feeling more claustrophobic than reassuring with each passing moment. Her laptop sat open on the desk, a blank page staring back at her as if mocking the urgency of her thoughts. Thoughts that flourished one moment and wilted the next, an unending cycle of emotional turmoil. The upcoming panel loomed like a specter, growing larger as she considered what lay ahead, not merely the presentation itself, but the raw confrontation that accompanied it. Setting down her coffee, she could almost hear her heart beating beneath her ribs. The prospect of sharing her journey, the struggle to articulate the resilience and agency of the princesses she admired, filled her with both hope and a gnawing sense of dread. This was it, this was her moment to meld personal narrative with academic rigor. Yet, the voice that whispered from the shadows kept asking if she was ready to bear herself in the public eye. She flipped through her notes, each scribbled detail a nexus of historical insight and personal reflection. What she had initially seen as a fierce preparation had devolved into an arena of doubt. Could she reconcile the layers of her research into something impactful, or would her words dissolve in the glare of scrutiny? The impending discussion with her rival loomed large. It triggered memories of past criticisms and roadside intersections of confidence and self-doubt, a tangled web that had once ensnared her. Determined to revert the narrative, Emily made her way to a local cafe, seeking the comfort of the familiar buzz of voices that camouflaged her turmoil. As she settled into a corner, she pulled out her notebook, hoping to instill some clarity. The gentle aroma of roasted beans mingled with the surrounding chatter, creating an atmosphere charged with possibility. She needed to regain control, not just over her thoughts, but over the trajectory of her career. Focusing on the task at hand, she replayed her previous discussions with peers in her mind, the riveting conversations that had sparked new insights and encouraged her to lean into her perspectives. Something shifted within her as she penned ideas down, a sense of purpose igniting once more. She would present not just the struggles of the Ottoman princesses, but the resilience they had shown in the face of societal expectations. Could she also summon that same bravery for herself? The realization struck hard. This was not merely about winning a debate with her rival. It was about authenticity, about crafting a narrative that encapsulated the complex interplay of emotion, strength, and vulnerability. Yet, despite this dawning clarity, doubt began to creep back in. Was her voice strong enough? Would others see the merit in her work, or was this another exercise in futility? From the depths of her internal battlefield, the need to reclaim her narrative shimmered. She needed to confront her vulnerability head-on, not just to quell the whispers of doubt but to invite others, including her rival, into a conversation about dismantling the very shackles that limited their understanding of history. Perhaps the discussion would challenge their preconceptions and allow others to witness a deeper layer of intellect interspersed with heartfelt resonance. As darkness settled outside, a newcomer entered the cafe, a familiar figure from the academic circles. Emily felt her heart race as her rival approached, smirking with that infuriating confidence that had plagued her for so long. He slid into the seat opposite, eyes glinting with challenge. "Ready for the panel?" he asked, his casual tone belied an undercurrent of competition. "Yes," she replied, her pulse quickening but with a newfound steeliness emerging within her. "I've been thinking about how we can both elevate the conversation." His brow furrowed in surprise, and for a moment, Emily saw a flicker of intrigue where there had always been derision. Perhaps this was the moment she needed, one that could shift the dynamics, confront her own fears, and perhaps chip away at his relentless skepticism. The layers she felt compelled to unveil could hold transformative potential, for both herself and those who witnessed it. Feeling empowered by her own resolve, Emily leaned forward, ready to embrace the conversation. Unbeknownst to her, this encounter was about to propel her deeper into a narrative she had not anticipated, the realization that the battle was not merely external, but deeply rooted in her own psyche. Would this be the pivotal moment that crystallized her growth, or would it merely set the stage for a more daunting conflict to come? The clinking of coffee cups and the hum of conversation faded into the background as Emily engaged with her rival. She sensed the tension hanging palpably between them, but instead of retreating into doubt, she leaned into it, inviting confrontation while forging a new path for herself. "Let us focus on what really matters," she said, her voice steady despite the anxious fluttering in her stomach. "The stories of these princesses are more than historical footnotes. They embody resilience in ways we can relate to today." Emily watched as his expression transformed, skepticism momentarily replaced by a hint of contemplation. If only she could marshal this interest into more than just a fleeting exchange. He hesitated, apparently weighing her challenge. "But do you think people will care?" he pressed, his demeanor shifting to that familiar competitive edge. What is so special about their struggles that it would resonate with today's audience? Her own fears echoed his question, the shadows of self-doubt lurking closer. Yet, she clasped the edge of the table, a subconscious grounding mechanism nudging her toward courage. Because their battles weren't limited to their time. Their stories are about identity, agency, and defiance, things we grapple with every day, Emily articulated, each word welling up from a well of passion she had forgotten she possessed. She observed his brow furrow again, pondering her perspective, possibly even assessing how it could elevate his own argument. It dawned on her that, while he had often been an adversary, this moment was also a chance for potential collaboration. Could they craft a blending of ideas, rather than a clash? His eyes flickered with intrigue. "Maybe you have a point," he conceded, albeit reluctantly, "but the academic world thrives on rigorous critique. Are your personal reflections robust enough to hold up?" At that moment, her resolve fortified. It's not just personal reflection, it's a call for deeper engagement. She had seen her life enmeshed within the threads of the Ottoman princesses. Their triumphs whispered in her ear, fueling her determination to break free from the suffocating expectations errantly tied to her identity. Emily doubted whether her experiences would resonate with a panel accustomed to traditional scholarly discussion. Yet the fear began to morph into a subtle strength, an understanding that vulnerability could be powerful, a bridge to authenticity. I've spent too long hiding behind textbooks, fueled by fears rather than proud ownership of my narrative, she continued, her hand extending as if to grasp a belief she desperately needed. At this panel, I want to ask every person present to appreciate how these women navigated their own paths and the complexities of power. He opened his mouth to rebut, but the words fell away as he regarded her with a new respect. Could it be that Emily's journey, her story as an academic and as a woman, began to merge with that of the princesses she admired? As they exchanged ideas, a subtle shift occurred, each sentence fostered a deeper understanding, and they wove through the lanes of possibility rather than barriers of competition. Little did she realize that the dialogue was not just about the Ottoman princesses, but about a reckoning she needed to face within herself. The timing of their conversation felt almost serendipitous, like the universe conspiring to allow her to reclaim her narrative. As their discussion deepened, Emily felt a swell of determination. If she could confront her vulnerabilities and showcase the depth of her desire for knowledge, perhaps others could too. For the first time, she sensed she might not merely be participating in an academic panel, but rather leading a discussion that could encourage others to confront their self-imposed limitations. Then, just as clarity struck, a question from her past emerged unbidden, a reminder of what awaited her at the panel. What if she faltered on stage, consumed by the same self-doubts that shadowed her? The prospect of failure loomed ominously, a specter that no amount of preparation could wholly dispel. But this was precisely the conflict she needed to embrace, the crucible through which her growth could pass. Emily wrestled with this heavy revelation just as her rival opened his mouth, ready to spawn an idea that could either bind them in collaboration or unravel her carefully woven resolve. Would his words extinguish her newfound strength, or would they meld to illuminate a path forward? The stirrings of an internal battle awaited her, and the challenge wasn't over yet. The panel was looming ever closer, with clarity glimpsed in 1 second and clouds of uncertainty in the next. What lay ahead was no longer merely a presentation, but a moment of profound reckoning, a true test of both her resilience and her resolve. Emily's mind raced, shifting from the immediate challenge of her rival to the upcoming panel. The conversation had opened a floodgate. What was once a mere academic exercise now felt like a genuine opportunity for transformative expression. Yet, contrasting with her newfound excitement was the dread of exposing her vulnerabilities on stage. As the days slipped by, she developed a strategy distilled from their conversation. To foster engagement, she would share her personal experiences woven in with the narratives of the Ottoman princesses. She envisioned herself painting a vivid picture of the struggles these women faced, juxtaposed against her own life. The stories of deceit, tradition, and rebellion burned in her mind like a beacon, igniting a path she could follow in her presentation. After countless late nights spent comforting the nerves that taunted her with the specter of inadequacy, Emily recognized that the panels offered more than an intellectual platform. They were a mirror reflecting her journey, a chance to translate her insecurities into strength, to lean into the uncertainty that once flustered her. Perhaps, if she could do that, others in the audience might find the courage to do the same. In subsequent meetings with her mentor, she pushed through barriers of self-doubt that had held her back for so long. What if I'm not taken seriously? She would confess. What if my perspective is too personal? Her mentor, a seasoned academic with years of experience, offered a steady reassurance. You are in the unique position of not just presenting information, but bringing new layers of understanding. Let vulnerable authenticity speak, that's where true connection lies. Those words resonated deeply, reverberating through Emily and challenging her to confront uncharted territory within herself. With each iteration of her presentation, she tested her material against these new insights, consciously addressing her own fears as she crafted her narrative. The act of writing and rewriting became a psychological exploration. She unearthed raw emotions that had long lingered in the shadow. The often overlooked histories and identities of the princesses peeled back layers in her own understanding of self. During one particularly intense session, Emily found herself tracing a direct line between her story and that of a princess who defied the norms of her time. She recalled heated conversations she had experienced with her own family, expectations imposed on her, the pressure to conform. The uncanny parallels brought tears to her eyes. Could this be the connection that resonated with others? But with every step forward, doubt clawed at her resolve. Would the juxtaposition of her own history with that of royal figures be seen as trivial? The fear of being perceived as self-indulgent warped her confidence. However, she reminded herself of her mentor's guidance: vulnerability could be powerful, not a weakness. Perhaps by exposing her cracks, she would reveal strength. Then came the day of the panel. Standing backstage, heart racing, she surveyed the small crowd shuffling in, their murmurs filling the air like electric vibrations. A nagging voice whispered for her to retreat, to play it safe. And while the urge to cling to the familiar beckoned, she fortified herself with the courage she had cultivated over the past weeks. She could feel the energy of countless women's stories pulsating around her, urging her on. Before she stepped into the spotlight, Emily took one last breath, forcing the reminder that her narrative intertwined with those she would present. It was not merely about delivering information, it was sharing a birth of connection that transcended time and individual experience. As she crossed the threshold into the light, stirred by warmth and anxiety alike, Emily felt the whispers of the Ottoman princesses behind her, each offering support. Would she transform this moment into the narrative she had been painstakingly weaving, or would her fears consume her? Unsure of what awaited on the other side of the stage, she stepped forward, ready to confront everything within her, and the moment of truth began to unveil itself. The spotlight engulfed her, drawing all attention in like gravity. Emily's breath hitched, the collective gaze of the audience solidifying her fears into palpable shapes. Battling the urge to retreat into the comfort of anonymity, she steadied herself, recalling the countless hours dedicated to her presentation. This was her moment, a chance to bridge the chasm between her story and those of the Ottoman princesses she had come to admire. As she began to speak, the initial stumble in her voice tapered off, replaced by a steady rhythm that surprised even her. The audience was captivated as she intoned the tale of one princess, a woman who had fought the weight of expectation with the fierce spirit of rebellion. Emily intertwined her own narrative, how she'd navigated familial pressures, the suffocating burden of choice, and the societal standards that whispered inadequacy into her consciousness. She painted her experiences against the rich tapestry of history, revealing stark truths in the delicate intersections of their lives. Yet, with every moment of clarity, shadows of doubt flickered in the corners of her mind. Was she wrong to equate her struggles with those of these monumental figures? The sweat beaded at her brow, threatening to steal her focus. What did I really know about true sacrifice? An inner voice chided. But as she observed the audience lean in closer, their faces etched with empathy and curiosity, she realized that vulnerability not only legitimized her struggles, it elevated the narrative itself. Taking a deep breath, she decided to take another leap. A few months ago, she confessed, I struggled with the concept of my own voice. I asked myself if personal stories have any place in academia. A ripple swept through the audience, a collective reflection of her doubts connecting and resonating with their own hidden fears. It felt as if they, too, were standing at the precipice and contemplating the leap. The narrative flowed easily then, her connection to the historical figures crystallizing as she shared her reflections on women's autonomy, drawing lines between their historical constraints and her modern predicament. As she unveiled the complexities of these women who had defied the shackles of tradition, she found strength in articulating her own story, the struggles, the heartaches, and the breakthroughs that led her here. The realization took hold, this wasn't merely a presentation. It was a shared experience of rising from fear, of confronting the narratives imposed by others and rewriting them in a voice uniquely her own. The audience shifted, enthralled not just by the historical parallels but by the raw authenticity emanating from her confession. Just as she began to feel a swell of confidence, the room's atmosphere shifted. A question loomed large in her mind: what if someone criticized her, dismissed her perspective? The thought became a distorted echo, attempting to erode the ground she had painstakingly built beneath her. But rather than falter, she took a deliberate step closer to the edge of vulnerability. "I am no Ottoman princess," she admitted with a tremor in her voice, "but like them, I stand here tonight claiming my own narrative. Each of us has a story shaped by our battles." The acknowledgement of her place among the historical figures ignited an inner flame, resilience rising from fear, belief in her capacity intertwining with newfound authenticity. The resonance shifted in the audience. They weren't passive observers any longer but willing participants in her journey. As Emily concluded, the applause enveloped her like a thunderous affirmation. She had liberated herself from the chains of self-doubt, emerging not just as a speaker, but as a storyteller who had the power to connect across time. Acknowledging the audience's enthusiasm, she felt the gravity of personal transformation. This was more than academic growth, it was a reclamation of self. Yet as she stepped off the stage, the adrenaline coursing through her veins still bore the imprint of lingering questions. Would this newfound courage sustain her in the days to come? And would she remain committed to expressing her voice beyond the confines of this presentation? The moment was layered, rich with possibility, and undeniably daunting. The real challenge awaited beyond the applause. How would she embody this catalyst for change in her life ahead? Determined to explore those prospects, Emily took her first step back into the unknown, feeling the stirrings of anticipation in the air. The next chapter of her life beckoned, fraught with the thrill of transformation and the weight of responsibility. What awaited her in this untamed territory? The echoes of applause still rang in Emily's ears as she stepped off the stage, her heart racing with untempered exhilaration. The spotlight had carved an indelible mark on her psyche, but the aftershock of vulnerability had also ignited a cocktail of trepidation and hope within her. Who was she now? The elation from her presentation flooded her system, yet the specter of doubt loomed larger than ever. She had shared her story, but now the real journey began, integrating this newfound courage into her everyday life. In the days that followed, Emily faced an unsettling discovery. Transitioning from an inspiring moment on stage to her routine reality proved more challenging than she had anticipated. A series of emails awaited her attention, each addressing the mundane demands of her academic responsibilities. As she sifted through requests from students, colleagues, and committees, she felt the urgency to maintain the momentum she had created within herself. She found herself sitting at her desk, staring at a blank screen, grappling with an unsettling tension. The internal battle brewing within her called into question the authenticity she had so boldly claimed. How could she continue to embrace vulnerability if the tasks ahead felt so conventional? The anecdotes of Ottoman princesses swirled in her mind, their struggles resonating with her own aspirations for liberation. With mounting frustration, she resolved to reach out to her mentor, Dr. Hayward, the very guide who had encouraged her to pursue this research in the first place. His reputation as a towering intellect in the academic community came with a contrasting warmth that made her feel at ease as she recounted her experience, sharing personal narratives. "Emily, you need to remember," he cautioned during their meeting, "the journey doesn't end at the podium. Your experience is a living embodiment of your scholarship now. Embrace it. Share your doubts, your questions. We're in a constant state of becoming." His reassurance hung in the air long after their conversation had ended, giving her a sense of direction. But confronting her fears demanded that she take risks outside the classroom. She began drafting a newsletter, an open letter to her colleagues exploring the intersection of personal narratives and academic integrity. The act of sharing her story in a letter felt daunting, but she recognized it as an essential step to deepen the connection between her scholarly purpose and her lived experience. Day after day, she filled the blank screen with reflections, revelations, and a call for dialogue. Each keystroke fortified her resolve. However, even as she advanced in writing, anxiety slumbered in the back of her mind. What if her colleagues critiqued her sincerity? What if she faced a backlash for daring to blend personal narratives with academia? To counter these fears, Emily began to revisit her core motivations, the factors driving her scholarly pursuits. What did she want her work to embody? The question became an anchor, allowing her to navigate the waves of self-doubt. She recalled the Ottoman princesses. Their resilience had taught her about encasing personal struggles within broader historical discourses, empowering her voice to resonate with complex ideas. After several compulsive drafts, Emily hit send. The email whirred away, leaving an electric silence in its wake. The instant the echo of the sent notification faded, she experienced a rush of validation mixed with sheer terror. In sharing her narrative publicly, she held her breath. Had she overstepped? Could she withstand the fallout? In those restless days afterwards, anticipation knotted in her stomach as she awaited responses. The silence amplified her insecurities until one afternoon, an unexpected reply landed in her inbox. It was from a senior faculty member, known for his critical edge. Would he build her up or tear her down? The moment of truth arrived as she clicked to read his response. What had she unleashed? Emily braced herself for the impact of the email, drawing a deep breath as she clicked the reply. The cursor hovered over the words, and she felt disoriented, caught between anticipation and dread. In this vulnerable moment, the screen felt like a portal into both possibility and peril, a volatile mix of acceptance and scrutiny. As she read, her heart raced. To her surprise, the professor's detailed critique navigated beyond the typical academic dissection. He wove in personal anecdotes of his own struggles with vulnerability and authenticity in his publishing journey. Rather than the cold appraisal she had feared, his response resonated with compassion and insight. He acknowledged the risk she took in merging the personal with the professional, highlighting how necessary this integration was for the progression of scholarship. This is the essence of scholarship, he wrote, to connect our lives with our work in meaningful ways. Your courage to show the personal behind the academic is compelling and necessary in an age where authenticity is often questioned. A wave of relief washed over her. But beneath that surface comfort lay another layer of anxiety. His invitation to continue the conversation was a challenge. It left her with the question of how to respond. Would her follow-up maintain the impact and integrity she had strived to project? Did she even have the right expertise to engage at this level? Determined, she pieced together a thoughtful reply. She acknowledged his insights, posed additional questions about engaging personal experiences in academic writing, and aimed to set the stage for an ongoing dialogue. As she typed, a flicker of empowerment ignited within her. This wasn't merely a conversation to defend her position, it was a collaborative exploration of ideas, a chance to animate her academic identity further. However, there was looming pressure. As the exchanges continued with her colleague, each email felt weighted with responsibility. She couldn't settle for surface-level discussions, she needed to dig deeper, to fuel this newfound professional journey with stimulating content and genuine introspection. That evening, her mind was a swirl of thoughts. She considered what Dr. Hayward had said about being in a constant state of becoming. This idea unsettled her in its implications. Becoming meant changing, adapting, and often confronting uncomfortable truths. What aspects of her own narrative might still need unearthing? Was she ready to peel back more layers, risking more exposure? Emily spent hours poring over her research notes, trying to find a common thread between her academic interests and her personal narratives. She dove into the ancient stories of the Ottoman princesses once again, realizing that their fates were often tied to their ability to navigate the intersection between personal desires and external expectations. This reflection deepened her own understanding of her scholarly voice. Weeks of untapped potential and unexpressed thought started to manifest on the page. She outlined a new research proposal that blended rigorous academic analysis with personal anecdotes, forging a connection she hadn't thought possible. It was ambitious and daunting, a recalibration of her approach to scholarship that would demand both vulnerability and intellect. With each draft, she felt herself evolving. The project became a voyage into the very heart of her doubts and aspirations, a call for academic honesty that mirrored the honesty she had channeled onto the stage. Even so, the weight of vulnerability loomed. What if her ideas were met with the same skepticism she'd faced before? In preparing to submit her proposal to a prominent journal, the night air buzzed with the anticipation of what lay ahead. She composed a brief cover letter, breathing in the mix of excitement and trepidation. The moment was ripe for a decisive leap, one that pushed her to transpose her voice into the broader academic conversation. But as she pressed send once more, she knew she was still on the precipice of something profound. Her heart raced with the thrill of what was to come, yet the question loomed larger than ever: was she truly ready to share more of herself, to face the professional and personal transformations that awaited her? As she prepared for the feedback that could either elevate or challenge her work, she pondered, could vulnerability become her strongest asset, or would it set her on a path she wasn't prepared for? Emily stood on the balcony of her cozy apartment, the city sprawling beneath her, glowing with the night's energy. The ominous shadows of doubt that had once haunted her began to fade, replaced by a brightness born of a hard-won confidence. The ambitions she had nurtured were finally beginning to feel substantial, merging with the lessons gleaned from the women she admired, the Ottoman princesses whose struggles had echoed across time. She now understood that the art of vulnerability could power not only her academic pursuits but her essence as an individual. Weeks had passed since her triumphant presentation, and her research proposal had officially been accepted for publication. As the days unfolded, Emily engaged in a continuous dialogue with her mentor and colleagues, refining her analysis while embracing the intersection of the academic and personal as they had advised. Each email, each meeting, contributed to her blooming understanding that her identity as a scholar was not an isolated journey but a tapestry woven from threads of shared experiences. Reflecting on her progress, Emily felt unshackled by the expectations that had once weighed her down. The insistent voice of her mother urging her toward stability became a distant murmur. Instead, she learned to validate her own path, acknowledging that deviation from others' expectations was not merely acceptable but powerful. Life, she realized, was inherently nuanced, full of intricate details that converged in unexpected ways. Unseen changes were occurring within Emily, her confidence now held a firm foundation. She had transitioned from uncertainty to assurance, from fear to courage. During her seminars, her voice resonated with clarity, and her words touched on historical complexities in ways that engaged her peers deeply, sparking meaningful conversations rather than dismissible critiques. With each encounter, she shattered the limits imposed by self-doubt, revealing her growth in arenas that had previously felt sprawling and intimidating. The memory of her rival's dismissive demeanor was just that, a memory, no longer a harbinger of her capabilities. Instead, she perceived his skepticism as an opportunity to deepen her resolve. Sitting at the oak table, papers strewn in front of her, Emily revisited the journal from her grandmother's attic. The insights from centuries past were threads in a larger narrative, a narrative she had embraced as her own. With each turn of the page, the words that had once echoed despair now ignited a sense of purpose. She wasn't racing to prove herself anymore, she was here to launch a dialogue, to connect histories that intertwined. The sense of fulfillment that enveloped her as she penned articles filled with vulnerability and strength was palpable. The applause of her peers faded into the background, replaced by a chorus of recognition, a community born from shared journeys. She had crafted her unique voice, valuable not because it conformed to traditional scholarly standards, but for the authenticity it represented. Yet, Emily knew that this was merely one chapter in her ever-expanding narrative. Invitations to lectures and workshops began flooding in, each an avenue not only to showcase her work but to inspire others navigating their closer paths, women grappling with their identities, their narratives, feeling the societal constraints just as she had. Finally ready to challenge herself further, Emily decided to speak at an upcoming symposium focused on the intersections of personal narrative and academic scholarship. This time, she would not hold back. The audience was not merely a space for her to present but a collective of individuals eager to understand the complexity of vulnerability in knowledge production. As her turn approached, she felt a deep-seated excitement surge through her. She was not confronting an audience filled with judgment but engaging with fellow explorers, each seeking connection across their personal journeys. "I stand before you today," she began confidently, "not just as a scholar of history, but as a woman who has redefined her narrative throughout this journey. My research has allowed me to draw parallels to the struggles that have shaped our own identities and lives. Today, I aim not just to enlighten you but to encourage discussions that embrace our vulnerabilities." The murmurs of agreement echoed around her as she delved into the stories she had unearthed, the tales of defiance and resilience she had cultivated, revealing that connection lies in acknowledgement of shared trials. This wasn't merely a presentation, it was a bond shared through the recognition of fluid narratives woven through time. Emerging from that symposium as an evolved academic and individual, Emily basked in the recognition of her courage to stand raw and real in front of others. This moment solidified her commitment to continue merging personal insight with academic rigor. Finally, standing on the balcony once again, the cool breeze fluffed her hair. She took a long breath, and in that moment, she comprehended the profound depth of her transformation. Emily was no longer confined by the expectations of past insecurities. She had achieved not just academic acclaim, but profound self-discovery, a pilgrimage from a timid scholar buried in self-doubt, into a recognized voice worth listening to. The narrative she continued to embrace was no longer one of fear, but empowerment. Tomorrow, she would embark on a new writing project, a forthcoming book that intertwined her journey and the tales of those Ottoman princesses, inspiring individuals to reclaim their narratives. This was a moment of triumph. She had conquered her fears, crafted her identity, and created a space, not merely for herself but for others to share their own stories. Now, as she leaned against the balcony railing, she congratulated herself on traversing the chasm from doubt to accomplishment, knowing that this journey of reclamation would not cease but rather open spaces for endless exploration yet to uncover. This clarity ignited an imperative within her, one that resonated for all dreamers caught in the shadows of self-doubt, a call to elevate their stories. So now is the time for you to embark on your own journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.